Docking his pay. You are not the prettiest secretary I've ever had. I told him last week. I said I've had prettier. My last secretary was prettier, and she was 87. So. All right. Yeah, we got lesson. Hey, don't you have lesson 4 on the floor there, Gail? Oh. Well, we passed it out last week. Just saying. So we're going to go over the lesson 4 handout. I don't know if there's any back and how many people need that? The last one. Okay. I mean, if you're too ashamed, that's okay. You need 5? Brian Mills.
Get more together, please.
All right. All right. Well, while we're waiting on my beautiful secretary, then let's go ahead and I'll repent of that later. It's okay. Let's go ahead and go to God in prayer.
Father, Heavenly, thank you for this day, and especially thankful for this opportunity we have to assemble and study the Word. We pray that you bless us as we delve into your Word, that we can learn things that we can better apply into our lives, and we can be better service for you. We always ask that you be with those that are sick in our number, especially pray for Brother Kenny and Sass and the others that are mentioned from time to time. Thank you so much for Jesus and his blood that was shed on that cross. We can have forgiveness of our sins and we come repenting of them. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, so we'll go over the questions from last time right up front. Hopefully we'll get through these a little faster than we did last week. All right, number 1, God's command to Noah and his family upon leaving the ark was to repopulate, multiply, is what we say in the scriptures there. So, but yeah, repopulate the earth. They've the animals and human beings had to do that. Number 2, the tower that man was building to heaven was called Babel. Now, I don't know if we really got into this, right? Did we get into the... no, we didn't. Okay. All right. So, the thought of the Tower of Babel was thought to be a ziggurat, which vaguely has this shape. And the reason that they think this is that it was a popular construction at the time. Anyway, it's a stepped pyramid. Pyramids were big, but this is a stepped pyramid. The difference with that and a normal pyramid, steps go right up like this. And if you're actually looking from down here all the way up, it actually looks like you could step into the sky. It just looks like you just walk. Matter of fact, I have a picture of a guy that is walking up near the top of a ziggurat, and it looks like he's about to just walk into the sky. And so there are some other thoughts on that. I don't really care. I just think that's interesting. So there you go. If someone has a different idea, more power to you. That's fine. I don't, like I said, it's one of those things I don't care about, but this is probably, a good solution to what is mentioned in the scriptures. Yeah.
It makes sense, that, of course, the ziggurat was more of a Sumerian ladder mascot, that type of design, and based on where it probably was located, makes sense.
Yeah, and which actually, as bad as I've been talking about Brian, he brought me his pictures of And so I'm gonna make copies of them. I'll actually make copies of them and make them available to anybody who wants them. But Ur was also a ziggurat. One of our earliest uncoverings in archaeology was a step temple. So, yeah. So interesting stuff there. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? All right. The Tower of Babel was constructed that they might make a city, a name for themselves, and not to be what? Scattered. Scattered across the earth. So the big point here is that they're trying to make a name for themselves. You know, they want to be known for something. You know, there's a lot of things that we might be able to say about that. Maybe the arrogance of man at the time, but yeah, that's. I guess next question though it goes along with this. What is meant by the Lord confounded their language? Confused it, yeah. The word there, the Hebrew word, means to mix. So I mixed it up. You know, and we've talked about this in the past. I was talking about this with teenagers, and if you have ever tried to talk to somebody that, okay, first of all, how many people in here have ever taken a language? You've taken a language, okay, all right. Have you ever tried to talk to somebody using that language, but you're not exceptionally proficient? Yeah. I love languages, and I took Spanish and German, and then I took some Greek and Hebrew, of course, for Bible. And I love language, but I know for a fact that if you don't know something exceptionally well, that it can be hard to communicate. Now, have you ever talked to somebody that you just don't know their language at all? I've talked to people that spoke Russian, and they thought because of the people I was with that I knew how to speak Russian, and I had to let them know the best way I could, which was not in Russian, that I don't know how to speak Russian. I'm like, I don't know, I'm sorry, you know, you talk to him, I don't know what you're saying. And but you think about that, what's going on here is all of a sudden people are speaking different languages. They can't communicate, and it got really frustrating really quickly. This, of course, couldn't continue.
Verse 4 says their whole purpose behind this was that they could build a city for themselves where they wouldn't be scattered about.
Yeah.
The ultimate end was God scattered.
Right. Yep. So, yeah, that's kind of funny. It's like, well, what you want, you can't have. And that's kind of an interesting thought. It wasn't God's plan for that to happen, evidently. So you think about that in your own life. Sometimes we want things to happen a certain way, and that just doesn't work out that way. I have Autumn got on to me about this last time I brought this up, because I used to have this quote that I would say every now and then, and that was, my life can be summed up in one sentence. Well, that didn't go as planned, and that's pretty much, I feel like, how my life is gone. And she's like, well, excuse me, you married me. And I was like, I know, you're way better than what I thought I would ever get. So, you know, didn't go as planned, you know. So, see there? You take that home. You take that home with you, Jimmy. So.
I guess you could hear something of it. I guess you could call it marketing how ironically the favorite language, I guess, language teaching program now at Babel.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Next question. Discuss the result of this action on the part of God. So you have now, anybody else with me on this one thinking how amazing it is that up to this point there's just been one language? That's pretty cool, you know. We just don't have that, so that's amazing. But yeah, we kind of already discussed this. They're scattered on the earth. They're not able to make a name for themselves, not able to all stay in the same place. And so didn't work out the way they wanted to. Number 6, Job, the man of patience, likely lived during this period of time. What event preceded Job's trials? What happened right before Job had all these trials? What started it all? Well, even before that, though, what happened just before that? Yeah, gave who? Satan, right. So Satan is involved right there, and he's challenging God. God gives him permission to go and to do this. Yeah, he couldn't kill him. So remember when we studied the book of Job, I don't know if you remember that class. It was like 2 years long. I don't know. But when we studied the book of Job, we indicated that there are 2 basic time periods of trials. You had that initial one where Satan's not allowed to touch Job, takes everything from him, but Job's health is intact. And he doesn't, deny God. And so Satan comes back and says, well, if you had let his health go, then he surely would deny you. And says, all right, fine, go ahead. And still, with all that bad stuff, still does not lose faith in God. Number 8, you have an outline of the book of Job. We went pretty much in depth on that. I'm not going to go over that. Number 9, patriarch means what? I don't think we said this before. Father rule. Yeah, father rule. So, what does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah, so the head of the household does this.
There was autonomy from family to family.
Yep. Yeah. Now, what did the father do? Yeah, right. So both those things, right? So the patriarch would, just like Job, so we're still, have just been talking about Job. Job was a patriarch for his family. He offers sacrifice for his children. Remember, they're having their birthdays at the beginning. It talks about every time one of them has their birthday, they all get together. And what does Job do? He offers a sacrifice just in case they sin. That's his thought process. So that's he is fulfilling that duty there. Number 10, Abraham was the father of the Hebrews, but the faithful. Yep, the faithful. All right, the term Hebrew was first used in reference to whom? Abram. Yep. The 3 Hebrew fathers were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right. Number 13, God's promise to Abraham was, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Yeah, that's a big thing. We in the religious world, it is not the case that people are taught to be obedient. It's not a relative thing in the religious world. There's a lot that is taught. You have people that will teach, well, all you have to do is believe, and then outside of that, you don't have to do anything. But even with the idea of like a once saved, always saved position, it tends to lend to this credence of people going, I don't really have to do anything because I've already been saved. So when I was teaching the teens, I was saying, look, you've got to be obedient. Obedience is a big thing. Are we going to mess up? Probably. Live long enough, you're going to mess up. But we're striving to be obedient. We're striving to be sanctified, set apart for a holy purpose. We're striving to be obedient. And so you wonder why Abraham is pointed out among everybody? Well, it's because he's obeyed God. All right, this promise was repeated to Isaac and Jacob. The descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the children of Israel. And the Israelites were God's what? Yeah, chosen people. The promise to Abraham was ultimately fulfilled in Christ. And of course, all of these are just pulled right out. If you ever have trouble on these, it's got a verse reference. You just look at that verse, it'll tell you the answer. Abraham's first home was Ur. And Abraham's wife and Abraham's sons. Yep, Ishmael and Isaac. Anybody have any comments before we move on into the rest of this class? All right. Now, if you want to, we're going to start here. We'll stay in Genesis 25 for a few minutes. So if you want to go over there, that'd be good. So this very first question on your outline here, Isaac's sons were who? Jacob and Esau. Now, Jacob and Esau are pretty famous for one very big reason, and that's the very next thing, and that is that Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. But when you look at Genesis 25 verses 25 and 26 says, "And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came out his brother, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them." This is really an interesting thing because of the fact that these two boys are born like right at the same time. Now, I was talking with our resident twins this past Sunday morning, and I asked if Emily will be able to correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I asked how many minutes apart they were, and I think they said 29. Is that right? So 29 minutes. I was actually, usually there is a decent gap between, obviously in the relative scope of labor time, that still probably feels like an eternity right there. But, that's a relatively short period of time, but there is time in between giving birth to twins. Evidently, in this spot, there's really no time in between. One boy comes out, and the other one's holding on to him. And so that is, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that it happens like that. And that there is there's no complications with that. Now, going back into that though, there was a complication during the pregnancy, and what was that? What was going on? Yeah, she was having some trouble, and she thought something was wrong, and those boys were evidently kicking each other and going to town. Because they were duking it out in the womb, and that was going to be representative of how they ended up living their lives together and how they'd be kind of at each other. But of course, going back into this chapter 25, verse 32, and 32 and following. Well, let's look at 27. It says, "The boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was quiet man, dwelling in tents." And I love pointing this out when you get to this. Sometimes, parents only have one kid. And when you have one kid, all of us have felt this way. Remember when you had one kid and you thought, I'm the most amazing parent ever? And then you had a second one, you're like, well, what happened to my record? What was going on? But when you have two kids, the neat thing, and when you have two or more, really, is how different they are. They're in the same house, and I psychologically, I've had people bring this up, and they'll say, well, I brought my children up in the same house, and I have to gently say, no, you didn't. You don't bring up anybody in the same house, because you have one child, and there's a family with the one child. When you have two, that dynamic changes. That is no longer the same place. And then, not only that, but the kids affect each other. And then how you deal with the kids will affect the kids. And, so you got to be careful in all those things. But, people are just different. You have some people that have, now it's really drastic between me and my siblings, because, I'm the middle child. I'm the boy surrounded by girls. So I was just completely different from my siblings, just for some basic facts. But even when you have two girls, two boys, no matter how many the number, you can kind of look at them and go, well, this one's got their personality and they do this. And, maybe you have one that's book smart, one that works with their hands, one that likes to do these activities, another one likes to do something completely opposite. And that's what you have right here with Jacob and Esau. You have Esau, he's a skillful hunter, he's kind of what we'd think, well, he's a man's man kind of thing. And then
an expert with this one, and it's odd how you have to treat each one differently when it comes to discipline.
Yeah.
What works for one doesn't work for the other. I'm sure with you, you probably got five, and it takes five different ways.
Oh yeah, and and it doesn't. And I would not say I'm an expert, but I would say, there are certain of my children that I just look at them, and they will almost break down in tears. Now, I will not name names, but there are others that, if I were to beat them within an inch of their life, I'm not even sure they would get what I did. And so you got to ask the question too, I'm definitely an advocate for, the spankings, but you also have to ask yourself too, am I getting through this way? Because at a certain point, I remember at that point where the spankings no longer worked for me. It's like, yeah, go ahead, Mom, Dad, go ahead, spank me. Let's get this thing over with. Chop, chop, And then, but then other things were a big deal. So at that point, when the spankings were no longer working, it was about middle school, and Mom and Dad were like, you can't talk to any girls on the phone. And I'm like, excuse me? You just did what? Are you allowed to do that? I was upset about that. That was a fantastic punishment at the time. So, you have to kind of punish in different ways because, you have different personalities doing different things. And, you're right about that. Anybody else have any comments before we move on?
Yeah.
Well, some of us read too much Mark Twain, learned to stick a newspaper in the back of their pants.
I heard a story one time that a man had his child, and when the preaching got started, when the kids would act up, he would spank the child and go home. So one time during the service, the little kid said, "Hurry up, spank me so we can go home."
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing, and I'll tell another story. This is what Autumn had to do whenever I was in preaching school, and I was either preaching somewhere or the congregation where I normally was had me leading singing. And so I couldn't really deal with the kids that much, but Alethea was just real little. She's the only one we had. I say kids, but she's the only one. And Autumn would get so frustrated because we're trying to train Alethea, and she's just little infant, and well, a little bit more than an infant, but she's old enough to know she needs to stop. And so she'd spank her and take her out and spank her, and then bring her back in. She'd cry because she wants to go out. And then she would take her out and spank her, and then she'd get to the point where she'd stand at the door because she was just acting up so much. But she would hold her head and make her look through the door, like, you got to stop. This is what we're doing right now. But the annoying thing was that there were people that stood out in the lobby, and they didn't need to. They were just there. And they would come over and start playing with Alethea. And I had to finally just go, that's not what we're doing here, guys. Stop it. This is not helping. We're trying to get her back in. But, you kind of have to think about that psychologically. That's what's going on. They're learning, how to manipulate at a young age. All right, moving on. Of course, the whole. I'm trying to just. Okay, I think I got plenty of time. Going back to chapter 25. Verse 28, Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, and Rebekah loved Jacob, and Jacob boiled pottage, and Esau came in from the field, and he was faint, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom, which Edom means red. And Jacob said, sell me first thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am about to die, and what profit shall the birthright do to me? So I was explaining this to the teenagers because we don't really do this, but they were asking about the birthright situation and wanting to know what that meant. And birthright was just based off of age, and I'll just do it for our, just easy. Let's just use easy numbers here. But let's say that this all represents like thousands. So let's say you've got child one, their birthright that goes by birth order. They're going to get $100,000. Child two, they're going to get 80. Child three, 60. 4, let's say 50. It just kind of went in order. And so, you want to be first, right? That's going to be the most that a person gets. You even see this played out because, Esau doesn't he doesn't just get nothing. He just doesn't get the best portion. But also, at this time, they knew that there was a big spiritual implication too. And on top of this, to kind of complicate matters for us is the fact that what was the prophecy given at the birth of during the complication stage of the pregnancy for these boys? Yeah, one would serve the other, and who was they even said who it was going to be. It was going to be the older would serve the younger. And so this was going to have to happen anyway. So I don't know what what all could have gone on with that, but obviously this is the way it happened, But
Deuteronomy says that firstborn gets double portion.
Right, yeah. So yeah, well, I guess I'm inaccurate here, but yeah, so they're going to get more in essence, and then everybody else gets something, But anybody else have any comments before we move on? So of course he sells his birthright, and I've always you just got to think about Esau. Have you ever really thought about Esau, about how he must have been? Because, here he is. He says he wants that food. Now, he's home. Now, granted, he couldn't go to the refrigerator and pull something out, but he could have gone and made something for himself. It just would have taken a while, right? And he evidently knew how to do those kind of things. But what do we see here? He says, what? What good's my birthright going to do for me? Yeah, because I'm going to die. I'm going to die anyway. Yeah. I just don't, I'm going to die. Why in the world do I need this birthright? So he sells his birthright. And of course, when you look over at Hebrews chapter 11, it calls Esau what? Profane. What does the word profane mean? We don't use it in the same way that it really is intended. Probably not the best way I can describe it without looking up an exact definition is a profane person does not understand the importance of important things. So the seriousness of a serious situation, they don't get it. So that's the idea with Esau. He is profane.
It's kind of like they don't get the implications.
Yeah.
A decision that they might make that's spur of the moment.
Yeah, it's really not the opposite of wisdom, but it's pretty close to the opposite of wisdom. It's like, you don't see, the future in something. So, that's exactly what happens with young kids when you're trying to train them. They'll do something, and they know that they're not supposed to do it. And you've probably done that when you were a kid, right? You knew you weren't supposed to do something, but you thought you were going to get away with it. And, that was the thing, like, if mom were to put some cookies in the cookie jar and she looked how she put those in there, and then she saw that top one was missing, and, the 4-year-old in the house is like, I know I got crumbs on my face, but why are you looking at me, Mom? That's really kind of the same idea. Is you just don't understand. You don't have any forethought. All right, moving on. Jacob's other name was Israel, right? Now, we have the number of Jacob's children. There were 13. All daughters except for 12 sons. So, and then we have the 12 sons here, which become what? Now they end up becoming the 12 tribes. Now, if you don't know the 12 tribes of Israel by now, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Here, you know what? Give me a show of hands of people who know the 12 tribes of Israel now. Oh, come on, people. You got to know it better than that. I've gone over it like 50 times. Thank you, Bill. You're now my favorite person in this room. The rest of you, you're on thin ice. I'm just kidding. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to record that for you, and I'm going to send it to everybody so you've got it. And then you play it on repeat until you cannot stand the sound of my voice anymore. And you will have... Okay, wait. I said that wrong. Probably at least a few days after you can't stand the sound of my voice anymore, then you'll have it. All right. Let's end with talking about Joseph. Of course, he had the coat of many colors. And all this happens in Genesis 37. Now, I was breaking this down, and we don't have the time to do this, or I kind of drew out a little family tree, kind of impromptu. But, these are cousins that he sold to. These are the Ishmaelites, and that would have been cousins. So... that's a crazy thought that when he's sold into slavery by his brothers to his cousins. And man, do you think you have a dysfunctional family? I don't know. you're probably not as bad off as Joseph's family here. But question, we just talked about the 12 tribes. Now, sometimes they're referenced as the 12 tribes, and then you look at the list, and there are 13. Why is that?
Because you got two half tribes.
Yep, you got two half tribes. Yeah, they have two tribes put together to make Joseph's tribe. So yeah, Ephraim and Manasseh, and so you'll see that come into play in Scripture. That's why you need to know those kind of things, because sometimes people do this. I had somebody, and it was laughable because I already knew the answer to that, but I had somebody that was trying to argue with me about the Bible and said, well, the Bible's inaccurate because the 12 tribes are mentioned and then there are 13. It's kind of like, mic drop, like, shh, got you. And I'm like, because two of those are one tribe. And, as soon as I said that, they're like, what? And I was like, Joseph's son. We went back and looked at it, and he was like, oh, well, I still don't believe it. You're like, okay. But yeah, those are good things to know, because you will have questions like that come up from time to time. People are like, oh, see, if this were written by a perfect, all-knowing God, then he would get the number right. But of course, there's that easy answer. Why were Joseph's brothers upset with him? Well, he was the favorite. That's definitely a big part of it. He was a tattler. That's what they thought too. He was the dreamer. I think that's a big point. I think all of these kind of mix up together. But, here it is. He's the favorite. Now, here's the deal. I tell this to people all the time when I get the chance. You should not have a favorite child. If you do, take that to the grave with you. Nobody should know. Nobody should ever know. This is a perfect example as to why you shouldn't have that. But here it is that he was clearly the favorite, and then he goes off and he's the do-gooder, and he's tattling on them. They don't like that. He's not playing ball with them, and then. But then all of that, I think, really comes to fruition when the dreams are present. Because what are the dreams indicating? You remember what the dreams were? Yeah. They're prophecies or visions here, and they're all saying that the brothers are going to bow down to him. Well, they don't like that. He's not the oldest. He's not the oldest. So yeah, that's a big deal. They were having these evil thoughts because they were jealous of what Joseph was saying, upset about it. Maybe they thought he was a little narcissistic. Who knows? I've heard people make arguments that maybe Joseph egged this on a little bit. I don't know that. I think that's kind of pushing things a little bit. I really just don't like doing that. I don't like trying to figure out what everybody's done. We're given what we're given. Let's just go off of that. But yeah, they obviously didn't like him. And then he's sold into slavery, and he goes to Egypt. He's in Potiphar's house. All seems to be going just fine, but then you have Potiphar's wife, and so then she makes sure that there's a day where nobody's in the house, and then she comes on to Joseph, and he runs without his outer garment on, and so then he is arrested. Of course, the rest of the story, he goes on to interpret other dreams, is able to interpret the dream for the Pharaoh, and then save Egypt in the process, and he becomes second in command. That's why Ephraim and Manasseh are going to take his blessing, because when it comes time for him to be blessed, he says, I don't need anything, bless my children. I've got plenty. I'm not lacking for anything. I just bless my children instead. And so that's what happens there. I think that's it. Anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I don't think Dad thought it was too bad either, so it's mentioned. He also was going to bow down, in Joseph.
Right, yeah.
And that is,
Yeah, that's a little too far, buddy. Yeah. Yeah. Now, anybody else? All right. Well, thank you for your attention.